Hey everybody, welcome to We've Got Ward, a Doof Media podcast series where we expertly dissect and discuss Ward, Wildbow's return to the world of parahumans. My name is Matt Freeman, and when I show up in the dream room, I have a microphone.
And I'm Scott Daly, and when I show up in the dream room, I have a gun. And then I shoot you and take your microphone. So I have a microphone. This is the weekly podcast where Matt and I eagerly dive into Wildbow's world of Gregor glue bridges, weaponized misery, and alien-based death powers as we analyze and interpret this ongoing web serial. This week, Infrared continues with chapters 19.4 and 19.b. Victoria and the rest of the Cape Army arrive at a location for the oncoming battle with Fortuna. In the calm before the fight, our characters all check up with each other, and none of them are doing great. Not even Chris. As the cracks begin to spread, we once again cut back in time for an interlude with Gilpatrick, as he and a small squad prepare to follow Rain into the dream room. We figure out who the stowaways are, but Love Lost Shard uses some good old-fashioned emotion blasting that knocks out all the humans, but opens them up to a well of power. Matt, what do you think of these two chapters?
Well, 19.4 is going to be fun to talk about. Things are very intense. There's this feeling of tension before the storm. Everything is very on edge. Everything, I think, is very precarious is a word we're going to be using several times today. And then, of course, the Gilpatrick interlude was the interlude we didn't know we'd been waiting for. But he's a great character to be in his head. I don't know. I just found him to be a very cool new character. Fun and what's the word? I guess like powerful, like just the writing, the way he kind of thinks and is, I found very resonant.
Cool. Yeah, I liked him a lot too. I really liked his chapter. I do think, and I think we got this confirmed by the author afterwards, but it felt like it wasn't a complete chapter. It felt like there was so much more to do there, and that's because there is. Oh, and so I think we're going to be getting more. So
good, because I wanted more.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get on into things. Quick announcements. I think the Doof the Right Thing writing contest is wrapping up
Friday, right?
Friday. So get in your stories again. The requirements are very reasonable and the prize money is very good. So consider submitting to that. Yeah.
Also, the All Packed Up 24-hour live stream. We're going to keep talking about this until it's here. It's coming up this March 6th. The guys are going to be live streaming for 24 hours to celebrate Deep Impact's completion of Wildbow's Pact. And we're going to be there. I think our friends from Do the Right Thing are going to be there. There's going to be other fun guests and activities. And it's going to be a charity live stream that both Elliot and Ruben are putting on to benefit. I think it's a homeless charity, right? I can't remember the name of it. I should know this.
Yeah, I think for homeless kids. I forget as well. But yeah, it's a really nice idea that they're doing. 24-hour live stream, those mad lads. It's gonna be really fun.
They're insane, and I love them.
I think we've committed to being there for 3 of those hours.
Yeah, and I'm like, whew, that's a lot of hours.
Yeah, right. I'm like, oh man, I can try to fit it in. And then last announcement. Why don't you talk about this one, Scott? This is your baby.
Sure. Our podcast, our long-awaited podcast covering Stephen King's Dark Tower series called Kingslingers begins, if you're listening to this episode, the day it came out on the 15th, tomorrow, on January 16th, episode 1 of Kingslingers, covering the first chapter of The Gunslinger. The first book in the series comes out, and it'll come out every Thursday from then on for... I did it all out today, Matt, for the next 16 months. So,
all right.
This has been a long time in the making, this show. I'm very excited about it. And I think that shows in our episode. It was a really fun conversation. We've already recorded that one, and I can't wait for everyone to hear it. So go to doofmedia.com/kingslingers, and there you'll find the links to subscribe to the podcast everywhere that this podcast is. It's also there, and the little introduction episode is up too. So we hope you guys give that show a chance. If you've never read The Dark Tower, you'll be like Matt, and journey through it for the first time, or if you have read it many times and just want an excuse to talk about it, you can be like me, and we will have fun together. I can't wait.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
At the very least, just check it out to see how I do as the Scott and how Scott does as the Matt, because for us, it's actually really weird.
Yeah, it's so weird. Oh my God. The preparation of the script and then the podcast itself was like, it's just different. It's very different.
Yeah.
But I look forward to the challenge, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So Kingslingers out now, sort of.
Yeah, basically. All right, Scott, 19.4. And we open up with the small army of 70 or so capes making their way toward the cracks, aiming for a specific spot where the terrain is split up so badly that there is actually an ever-present danger of falling through the cracks. Victoria compares it to being on rooftops. It's precarious, you could say. And in fact, Victoria uses that word. I think the whole chapter is precarious, actually. Some capes are working to shore up that precarity, Tristan and Gregor prominently among them. But yeah.
This is, as we talked about in the intro, this is the setting of our big confrontation. Our characters are here, and they're just waiting for Fortuna to come. And nothing about this battlefield is secure and stable, just like our heroes, right? It's the perfect way that the environment matches the tone of the book. It matches the feeling of our characters. It's really precarious. I think this metaphor extends out really good with Tristan later in the chapter too. I think that the things that the chapter is doing around this central idea of the setting and what's going on with Tristan is really, really great. But I think it's interesting that Wildbow goes further here and links it back to fighting on rooftops, which has a very specific connotation for Worm readers. Like we were in the head of Taylor. We know one of the first lessons she learned in the world of capedom was it's bad to fight on a roof. Don't do that. It's real bad.
Yeah, I love that pull. I mean, comparing it to the beginning of Worm, because it gives it a feeling of connection and I don't know, it gives us a feeling like things are like reaching back to that point that feels powerful and meaningful, right?
I agree. I totally agree.
Cool.
Also, as a side note, we said last week that for the most part, these cracks into the world result mostly in people falling down into the shard world. Like we talked about that as helping reinforce the idea of this infrared name meaning, this underworld, this trip to Hades almost. And that's still absolutely true. But I think it is important to say that we do see two cracks around this setting that go up into the sky and split the sky open. And I think it's important just to mention that these do exist. It's not all just under. But I think this is cool because it kind of mirrors how the end of this chapter goes, right? Because at the end of this chapter, these cracks are going to arc up Fortuna, and I think it kind of mirrors that. So it's kind of reinforcing that, yes, these cracks are not just in the ground, and we're going to pay that off when we see them go through the Titan.
Yeah, I guess that is a really interesting. It's a small touch because I know that the text said that the cracks were not really 2-dimensional; they were 3-dimensional. So some of them presumably went off in all directions. But I think it is kind of good to remind us prior to the ending of the chapter, like, yeah, they can totally do that. And so we're not surprised by that.
Yeah.
So Victoria and Sveta, in contrast to Tristan and Gregor's approach, their kind of strategy for getting people around is to lift people across the gaps and then kind of put them in place where they need to be. And I really want to see this as like two different strategies for dealing with issues in general. Like if we view the whole concept that everyone is dancing around on these sort of islands of land with cracks between them, then that's a metaphor for like how they're doing in general. Well, Tristan and Gregor are the type of people who want to try to build bridges and repair the cracks, even if in Tristan's case, his building material is literally rubble that just crumbles. Whereas Victoria and Sveta, their approach has more to do with just jumping over the cracks, which solves it. Sort of addresses the issue, right? Because you get over the cracks, but you have to do that every time,
right?
And it's not a permanent solution. And I couldn't quite make this metaphor like really hold up, under scrutiny, but just trying to kind of view this in the light of being a metaphor, I think it's interesting to think about, even if I don't know if I can like do anything further with it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, I like it a lot for Victoria, and I don't want to denigrate any of the progress that Victoria has fought hard for and earned throughout this book on herself, but I think it is generally true that Victoria's solution to solving problems is just put it over there. I'm just gonna hop over it. I don't have to fix it. I'm past it now. I got past it. I got past the problem. Look, it's behind me now. I don't need to deal with that again. That's kind of what she does. So I think this fits. I had a harder time like marrying it to Sveta, but she's mostly just kind of helping. What is Sveta exactly doing? Is she like leaping across and bringing people with her?
Yeah, I think she's like grabbing people around the waist with her tendrils and then pulling them over.
Yeah, I think this metaphor works. I mean, I don't think we have to go super deep with it beyond that.
I think one of the things that made me think that I was on kind of the right track was that they talk specifically about Tristan like wanting to test the stability of the structure he had built. I think that was the language that Victoria used. We might get there in a minute, but that's literally kind of what he's doing here. Like he's trying to build up something and then relax and trust that it's actually still there. And he wants to get to a place where he doesn't feel like he's kind of fighting constantly, which it is reminiscent of what Victoria has said recently, where she's tired of enduring. And, the idea of having like constantly lift people between islands is the kind of thing where it's like, well, you just have to keep doing it. That you didn't come up with any other solution, so you just have to keep doing it.
Right, and to kind of play with the metaphor even more, like Victoria has the ability to fly over her issues, right? Whereas Tristan doesn't. Tristan has to use the tools he has. Victoria uses the tools she has, and I think that is how we approach our issues as well, right? Like we approach our issues with the tools in our mental utility belt that we have.
Yeah.
So I like that. I like that a lot.
So Victoria then tries to lift a big, heavy armored guy using her force field, and he kind of flips out, causing her to drop him. This event further reinforces how on edge everyone and everything feels about this situation. But once again, Crystal has her back, helping with the guy's outburst and kind of smoothing it over.
Yeah, we're gonna have a lot to say about Crystal here, but I love that this kind of calls back to the first moment that she picked up Tristan, and Tristan like freaked the fuck out.
Yeah.
And I remember you and I talked about, it's like, hey, maybe like warn people before you do that. Nope. No lesson learned there. At least with Tristan, there was some level of trust, so he didn't like completely freak out. But this is just some random dude that she just says, hey, you want to ride? Yeah, sure. And then suddenly he's being picked up. And I think the implication here, at least Victoria thinks, is that maybe whatever power he has allowed him to see the wretch when it came out, and he just like freaked out about it. And I love in that moment where she walks through that in her mind. She says, did he see you, a power? I just love whenever she starts personifying waste enough to where she's directly talking to them in her thoughts. I love that. Like it's very specific. Like it would be so much easier to did you see my force field? No. Did he see you? I like it.
Yeah. I adore that as well. I've wondered a couple times if like she's not using way more force than she realizes.
Could be, yeah.
Which would make, if somebody grabs you like with crushing strength, you might react a different way. That's less of a I think that's what's going on, and more of a that's a possibility. But
well, I mean, she says there's later in the chapter she wonders if her force field's gotten stronger as part of her hypothesis for what's happened to the powers. And he does say it feels like he's about to be thrown, not that he's being picked up, that he's about to be thrown. So it is very possible that she just hasn't gotten a handle on the new, slightly increased strength of her force field, and that is part of it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense that like if you have this force field that can crush a car into a cube, you wouldn't necessarily have like the proprioceptive feedback necessary to like gently pick a person up. But I don't know. That's kind of a rabbit hole to go down.
Or maybe her fine motor control is getting a little less fine. I don't know.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So Victoria mentions that she's aware that Crystal is babysitting her, and she asks who has Crystal's back. And Crystal says Lady Photon has her back, but I don't really find it terribly convincing. And later on, she says Sarah's not even really noticing how messed up Crystal is about all of this. So Lady Photon can't really be said to be taking care of Crystal in the way that Crystal taking care of Victoria, at least. And as a reminder, Crystal is also pretty down about how her power has changed in ways that she doesn't like.
Yeah, a lot of this is kind of very interestingly hitting that, hey, Crystal's not doing well drum a lot. Like,
Yeah.
this has been kind of a thread throughout this now, right? We had that whole interaction between Crystal and Tristan 2 chapters ago. Last chapter, I don't remember, where they talked about being on like joining their support team for I forget, like the people, I forget what they named it, but like there were people that were lost that are no longer lost, you know, and they're both on this club together. So like there's a lot of work being done by the book here to kind of show Crystal as not doing very well. And it's really gotten me nervous for her. And I know you've been on the I'm very nervous for Crystal train for like 2 months now,
right?
But I'm all aboard, because like this makes me think like the level of not great she's doing right now makes me think back to the Crystal that we saw at the beginning of this book after that horrible broken trigger event, and how that nearly destroyed her, right? I mean, she was out of it for a while. It took her a bit to recover from that, to become functional, just to exist anymore. That was a horribly emotional and devastating experience for her. And are we moving towards something like that again? It seems like we might be.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always, for some time thought that Crystal was kind of a candidate for being a nexus point of things going wrong. But I will say that stepping back from it, I mean, we're about to see Tristan kind of flip out at somebody.
Yeah.
The guy who yells at Victoria, like that's kind of a sign of being on edge. Basically,
got Chris.
What? Sorry?
We got Chris as well.
Yeah, we got Chris being just as snarky as usual, if not more. I mean, so just like everybody here, including Victoria, including Sveta, is not doing well, and that is being re-emphasized for us. And I think that the purpose for it is to say, I mean, first of all, just make it more dramatic, right? But secondly, to say that any of these people could really be on the edge. Any of these people could potentially go Titan if they get pushed just a little bit farther. And that's obviously the kind of the main risk that's been drilled into our heads at this point. So
yeah,
I feel like something like that could be happening soon. We'll see.
Yeah, and I mean, I like it because I think it allows you to like when the very beginning, I think, of last arc, we were like, oh, they seem to be setting up Tristan to go Titan. And if that was the only person that the book took the time to do that with, you would be like, well, this is either so obvious that it's definitely going to happen, or so obvious that it's not going to happen. But what the book has now done is it's kind of tossed a bunch of balls into the air, and we don't know which ball is actually a grenade that's going to explode.
Yeah.
And so there's this natural tension that comes of that, where we're looking at all these characters are suffering. And I think one of the things this chapter does very well is kind of link the suffering of the characters together. We're going to talk about the ways in which the stuff Tristan's going through specifically links back to Victoria in interesting ways here in a second. But it's all linking this stuff together, and it just helps paint this picture of it could be any of these people. We have to be ready for that possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, just like we said, Tristan is yelling to go check on him. And he's basically just had it up to here with somebody using ice to try to support his rubble piles. Basically, the whole situation around him is like orchestrated to make him upset about losing his old power, which when you think about it, it was a power that involved building, right? And making stable structures, which Tristan very much needed.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, it's a perfect way to carry forward that metaphor that he's desperately trying to solve his own issues, but his ability to do so has been taken away from him. Everything is too unstable, too liable to collapse. And when people try to help him, he lashes out at them because they're not helping in the correct way. Which, I mean, I don't know if this is an intentional callback, but this made me think of our conversation about Victoria's attempts to make Tristan feel better back early last arc, and how you and I both kind of agreed that the way you're approaching this is not really going to work for Tristan. That's not what he cares about. And so this reminded me of that, of someone who comes over, wants to help support the structure that is Tristan, means well, but is just not doing it the right way.
Yeah, I think that's really great. I mean, just Victoria is this character where I think she's a great battlefield leader, and I think in some ways she's a great leader, but in other ways she sometimes just can't tap into certain members of her team, right? Like we've historically seen her sort of fail to connect with Tristan, sort of fail to connect with Kinsey. I think the only two people who I think she really got were probably Swan Song, which actually took a while, and and Sveta, who she has kind of a prior relationship with. So I think just to kind of emphasize what you're saying, it's not the strongest aspect of her as a leader.
Yeah, I will say that one positive point, if we continue to hang on this metaphor as if it's going to be perfect for us, eventually Tristan does get some help from Gregor to shore up his stuff, right? And we leave Tristan in this chapter at a place where he's gotten some help from someone else to correctly and hopefully efficiently shore up the stability that he's made. So maybe that's a hint through the metaphor that he's going to be okay. I don't know.
I mean, I like that a lot. Like, it's funny because the more I think about it, the more I realize like his old power was about creating a structure that he could lean on because he needs something he can lean on. And his new power is like, fuck you. This power is literally rubble. It's literally destroyed structure.
Yep.
But then having somebody else who can be like, I'll just spit my mucus all over your rubble and then it's fine. And see, it's not so bad. Hug.
It's great. It's great because Byron's power was like how he would just go in with the flow, you know?
Yeah.
And now it just literally stops anything from flowing.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. Let's talk about his power in a second because I'm not sure if I fully get it, but we'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
So Shamrock shows up. She prances across one of Tristan's rickety debris bridges in the middle of this conversation about how frustrated he is. And then she has the gall to throw them a wink, which leads to this exchange. I glanced over at Tristan, and by the look he gave me, we were on exactly the same page, despite the fact we'd come at it from different directions. He had been through it with at least one other person, and I wasn't really in the mood for fucking winks. That's just fantastic. I mean, I love everything about that. I also love how it says earlier, Tristan is saying like, please don't do that. And it says, every time he said, please, it sounded like fucking.
Yeah.
It's great.
It's really great. Yeah. I mean, I think it's incredible the ways in which people can just like entirely accidentally piss you off really bad. Right. Yeah. Like, she doesn't mean any of this. Like Shamrock is not trying to upset any of these people. She just doesn't understand the situation yet. And that makes me convinced now that Fortuna is now initiated path to making Shamrock wink in front of Victoria and really piss her off. Because that's just what I'm going to assume everything is now.
Yeah, sure, of course.
What this does do, I think, though, what this actually does is kind of start to connect Tristan and Victoria in our minds. We are in Victoria's point of view. We are in her mind, and we understand exactly how bad she's doing because we're in there. And here we're looking at Tristan, this Tristan lashing out, this Tristan saying please, but sounding like fucking. But we don't quite understand really the depths of where he is. And I think Wildbow having them share this moment of exasperation links them together in some way and allows us to maybe understand that, okay, here's where you think Victoria is at bad. Like, here's how bad she is. Maybe you should be putting Tristan right there too. Like if you think Victoria is doing bad, maybe link them together and then Tristan's doing real bad. And I think that helps like gauge where he's at right now, which is important because a lot of this chapter is kind of going through exactly what's going on in Tristan's head.
Yeah, what I was thinking about at this point was like, you know, we've read this book spread out over a long period of time, but I was pretty much immediately like, Tristan has never really kind of lost it quite this badly.
Yeah.
Like just kind of snapped at someone, and that to me says a lot about where he is. Like it's uncharacteristic of him, and so it really stands out as being like, oh, okay, this is a symptom of how bad he's doing. Definitely. Yeah,
except for that one time with Byron, though.
That's true. that was a time that a bad thing happened, but he was calm.
I think that's kind of the point, though.
Yeah.
And I think we make that connection. Well, let's just get to it because I think it's important.
Okay. So Shamrock then talks a little bit about powers changes, and she uses the word heavier a couple times. Other words that are used in context of the powers discussion are restless, stronger, and more power. And I think like just by this little bit of information, if I had to hand wave everything into a bin, I'd say that powers in general might have gotten more like raw destructive power and less control and less utility and less versatility.
Yeah, I think I agree with that assessment generally. Like we were talking about before, Tristan loses his ability to create walls. Crystal loses fine control but runs hotter. We're not entirely sure like what the mechanics underlying this whole powers shift are, right?
Yeah.
But it seems to make sense that the computers pushed out versions of those powers which would emphasize destruction a little more over anything else, over defense, over utility. It makes sense in this warped little alien mind, right? Which of course means we can assume that the Godbirds in Egg's belly are like super violent, and maybe it can't smell out people anymore. Maybe it just eats them.
Yeah, it does make me wonder, like, the ones we're going to see later on, are those the same ones that he always had, or are these like bigger, scarier ones? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
I wonder if we'll find out.
The only thing I can't quite shake is how heavier ties into that specifically.
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of makes sense. Like heavier would be like, you know, heavier, more powerful. I think you can kind of draw that line, right? But maybe it's just like, I don't know, you know, you get married, you put on weight, and then you have an excuse. Yeah, my power's, I'm totally heavier now.
Yeah, I mean, I was going for the connotation of heavier with like, it's heavy, man. Like,
yeah, no,
like,
I get that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's something to do with all this, but I also think we don't have much data to go off, so I think we'll just wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is kind of the ongoing mystery of this arc. Kind of Victoria is we literally see Victoria attempting to grab data and solve this, and she has a hypothesis that I think we're going to see even more fleshed out as more data is collected. So
yeah, she doesn't really think explicitly about it, so I think we're not really meant to understand yet.
Do you think it's weird that she hasn't tried out her aura at all yet?
I've continually thought that her relationship with her aura was weird, and I think I said this maybe even last week, actually, just like she's weirdly incurious about it for being this powers nerd, and like it took her a while to experiment with her force field, but she eventually did. But she's never really, at least we've never really seen her have that scene where she figures out, okay, what exactly is different.
Yeah. I mean, to be charitable to her, I think she's generally like, it could really fuck people up. You're using this on people, you have no idea what the emotional effect on people is going to be. And I think that's something that Victoria is very conscious of emotionally fucking with people's brains, you know? So I get why I think there's an in-universe reason why she might be hesitant to just use it on allies.
Yeah, but at the same time, it feels like a big old Chekhov's gun. I mean, think about how important Rain's crappy motion power ended up being once they kind of cracked the secret of it. But Victoria's spent no effort really trying to crack the secret of her own emotion power.
Yeah. I mean, and that's been that way even before the change.
Yeah.
All right, so I think you're right.
It just continues to be the case, but now it's way more something. We don't know what.
Yeah.
So they briefly mention that Rain's present mission basically will be over in 13 minutes. He's going to wake up in 13 minutes, which this information is a lot more important in context of the interlude that we're about to read, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it helps kind of orient time for this chapter and the next one, because the next one is going to kind of jump back in time. And we're not even going to get up to present day through that arc. I mean, or through that interlude. Yeah. Presumably the second half of it will get us there. But
I hope so.
It really does. Like, because I think the orientation of time is important here, right? Because we have some data from Victoria. Like, Victoria saw Rain in the Shard Land through the crystals. So we know that whatever's going down in the dream room is before all that. So like we understand that the bomb, like the bomb blowing up and her shooting the laser in the thing happens after 14.b or 19.b rather.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well.
So, I mean, I think the point is that all this is just important to help orient us in time over these next two chapters, especially when you're going to start jumping back and forth in time. It's good to help orient yourself. We also know that, like, whatever crazy shit that's going to go on in the dream room because of the Case 53 infiltrators hasn't happened with 13 minutes left in dream time, presumably, right? Like, presumably whatever they're going to do is going to be bad enough that we would know about it in this. Victoria would know about it, presumably. We could make that assumption.
Yeah, or I mean, what they're doing causes the cracks to spread right here at the end of this chapter.
Yeah,
potentially.
very, very possible as well. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I agree that it's that line is basically to anchor us in time, and I think it actually does that pretty effectively because as soon as we get to the next chapter, you're like, okay, this is definitely way earlier, and that's all I need to know. I'm good. Yeah. Yep. Okay. So Victoria and Sveta go off to find like a telephone pole to use, and Sveta dishes on the private conversation with Tristan. She tells us that Tristan is struggling with dark thoughts, and he isn't sure what the point is anymore. And one kind of specific point that Sveta conveys is like, hey, Tristan wanted to be team leader, and you kind of took that away from him, Victoria.
Yeah, and like we were talking about before, I think there's a lot to talk about this conversation, and I want to spend some time on it because I think there's a lot of things in here that link Tristan and what Tristan is going through back to Victoria again. Like this opening part right here where she says, he got into the hero stuff initially for the fame and the money, for good reasons too, but those other reasons are still reasons. And she says, yeah, I could sympathize with the wish for fame myself. So we've linked them, right? Like Tristan is in this thing for good reasons, but also for the fame and money. So is Victoria, right? Fame was definitely a part of it for Victoria. So that's them linked together. And then we get this other point where he says the way he phrased it, he had a moment where he just stopped, took stock, and felt like he was drowning. And this is a reference all the way back to chapter 8.3. Thanks, Kayakin, for the chapter reference. When Tristan is talking to Vicky about how particularly bad he was doing back then. And here he says, tired, nothing big, tired of swimming, always on the cusp of drowning, can't get away from my situation. And so now here, 11 arcs later, he's not on the cusp of drowning anymore. He's drowning. He feels like he's drowning. And so again, this is a link. It's a link back to an earlier Victoria conversation. And so now through this link, we have a good grasp on how Tristan is because we knew how bad he was back then based on his conversation with Victoria. He's worse than that now. This is worse.
Yeah, it's interesting because it sort of happened outside of my attention, at least as a reader, because I had this impression, at least, that he seemed to be doing a little bit better, especially relating to his relationship with Byron. Like they seem to find this peace. Byron got injured, and he seems to be really concerned about Byron, and he's kind of going out of his way to take care of him, and it all seems very positive. But we also have had plenty of moments throughout the story where, like, his family is not being particularly nice to him, especially his mom. It's kind of like nothing, he had this kind of setback with reconciliation recently. Yeah. And I think in the background, we have been having kind of this set of data points that make up a constellation, if you will, indicating that he's just not doing great.
Yeah. I mean, and I think the Byron stuff is really interesting because I do think his relationship with his brother was the one thing that was going good. Mm-hmm. Right. Like this thing with reconciliation really fucked him up. This thing with his parents was not great. The guilt that he carries with him constantly messes him up. But he had this relationship with his brother that was finally going okay. And then Byron got hurt. And there's this interesting quote back in 8.3 that I think matters here because he says when he's talking about how bad it is, he says, I have days where I can't do it anymore. No energy to keep fighting and pushing forward. Byron worries about me then, but that's not the hard part. It's that all the time I'm also watching Byron worrying about him. Got to keep an eye out. And in that he was talking about how he's got to keep an eye out, like making sure he's not being too hard, making sure he's not taking too much control, like asserting himself too much, making sure he's trying to keep the balance and how that's exhausting. He's not doing that anymore, but he is consistently worried about Byron. Byron's injured. We don't know like how his recovery is going. The split in time is shifting because of that. It's just his brother is a worry of another constant worry on his shoulders again. And that he says back in 8.3 is the hardest part. And it's here again. He's worrying about his brother constantly.
That's true. Yeah. It's turned from something that was maybe potentially becoming a support into a burden again.
Yeah.
Totally.
And then so the last link between Tristan and Victoria, of course, is what you talked about at the beginning, which is the leadership role in Breakthrough. And this is something that to me was just so fucking relatable, right? You want to do something, but then someone else says they want to do it, or they just start kind of doing it, and you just kind of let them do it, right? And then you're kind of annoyed because actually that's what you wanted, but they're doing a pretty good job, so you can't like be mad about it, and you didn't actually ever say anything to that person, so you can't actually be annoyed by it, but you're still kind of annoyed by it anyway. That's like how I handle conflict in my whole life. Like that's everything I do is that. So I was like, oh my God, I feel this so much. I feel it so much, Tristan.
Yeah, I do feel like that's exactly what Sveta's conveying here. Like she's basically saying like, yeah, sorry to tell you, but he is still kind of upset about that, even though it's been a while and he's never mentioned it. And it kind of, it leads to Victoria being like, oh, I could, give him leadership. Like she takes it like a champ, right? She takes this information like a champ, but I think Sveta is right in saying like, no, that's not really the solution in this situation. Right. It's more like that's just part of everything that's culminated in this.
Yeah, I mean, I think she even listed as like not even in the top 10 of his real struggles right now. Mm-hmm. But when you're struggling under the weight of all this stuff, even the little tiny insignificant things suddenly seem more, Yeah. Like, so this is not something that I think he loses sleep over, but is just another straw on that camel. And it's, And I mean, I totally agree with the respect for Victoria for like, as soon as it's outlined how bad he's doing, she instantly wants to solve it. And she's like, well, here, I'll give him leadership. Will that do it? Will that solve it? It's like, no, that's not the core of his problem, is that he's not leader. Like, and it's just, I think the powerlessness of it, the hopelessness of it, we're going to talk about hope a lot for the rest of this chapter. Yeah. But I think that's really, it's wonderfully drawn, and I really like the interaction between these characters. Like these characters are so complicated, and we spent so much time with them now that we can really just just what if these scenarios and say, okay, what would Victoria do if she learns that Tristan actually wants to be leader? And we can just like let that scenario play out, and it's really interesting.
Did they ever officially make Victoria the leader, or is she
I don't
just
think so.
Is she, like, I feel like she's just the leader because she's Carol's daughter, and there's literally no other way that she would exist on this team other than basically being the leader and calling the shots, and everybody being like, okay, all right.
Yeah, and I think in her mind, she always kind of said, well, me and Tristan and Ashley are kind of splitting it. But she was always kind of leader. And Ashley died, and I think she's pushed herself, like, not intentionally. Like, that's the thing about this, is none of it is, like, her consciously being like, no, Tristan can't lead me. Yeah. That's not how she operates.
No, it's more like the decision point comes, and then she's just the one who ends up calling the shot, and then everyone else listens. And I think partially just because she has natural leadership qualities, and she's smart and kind of knows what the right call is usually. So
totally. Yeah.
Cool. So they also talk about what's bothering Sveta. And I think this is important because we're kind of just canvassing everybody who's around and kind of seeing how they're all doing.
Everyone except Victoria, of course.
Exactly. So namely, the thing that's bothering Sveta right now is the whole Weld lying to everybody plan. I mean, okay, Sveta says it's not really bothering her, but I don't believe her. Yeah. I also think it's funny that Victoria agrees with us regarding Weld, says, Weld's a Boy Scout, Sveta. He's probably in my bottom 10 people to go to if I want deception and acting ability.
Yeah, this continues to be the world's dumbest plan in all regards.
Yeah, also Sveta's specifically like, oh, no, but like he's good at this because his Manton status makes him immune to lie detection.
Nope.
And I mean, like, it's funny because I was even thinking about saying this last week. I was like, I would have thought that Manton that Weld would be immune to lie detection, but then I thought about Black Forest, and I was like, I bet that power is just as fucky on the line between biological and physical that it just doesn't care.
Or it could be some 3-dimensional chess stuff where it's like, everyone knows you're the lie detector, so we're going to tell Egg that I was lying, Mm-hmm. I don't know. No, I don't think that's it. That's too complicated.
Yeah. That maybe.
Look. Sveta says she's fine with this whole stupid fucking plan. And I want to believe her, right? She says she doesn't need hope for the future in the way that Tristan does, and she's fine in the moment as long as she has the people around her and care about her. And I want to believe that too. And I think that's because what she said there is true, right? She said there is like, as long as I have people around me, I'll be okay. Like, I've never had a hopeful future. I think that's true, but I think she does this very clever dodge in which that doesn't have that much to do with feeling hurt that Weld is doing this stuff right now. And I can't reconcile this as a reality that she's painting here. Like, the defining trait of Sveta in this book was back in Glowworm. The defining characteristic was her reeling from these groups of Case 53s that all hate her now, right? Like, her chapter in Glowworm was mostly about these people contacting her and just being shit to her and how much it hurt her. And granted, that was before Breakthrough, and it was before Victoria, and it was before she found this group, this family, and this support system. And so maybe when she says she doesn't need those people anymore because she has these people, and those people that hate her don't bother anymore, that she's fine because she has these people. But nah, man. Nah, I don't believe it. I don't believe it.
It reminds me of Tristan, and like, obviously still tears him apart that his mom isn't talking to him. Mm-hmm. And the Case 53s were basically Sveta's family. Yeah. And the idea that like, oh, well, I have new friends now. It's like, nah, that's not how that works. Like, you're yeah. I mean, I think like maybe eventually you can get over something like that, but this is also fresh.
Sure.
I agree with you there.
I do think it's interesting because I was thinking about this a lot because I remember back in the early parts of this book, we classified Sveta as this person, this eternal optimist, this person that like looked towards the future and fervently believed tomorrow was going to be better than today. And I went back to its arc 2. It's the end of the arc where Victoria both like for the first time meets up with Sveta, and that's what basically she says. She says tomorrow, like, things are going to get better, and she firmly believes that. And I just don't know if I buy this depiction of her as a person who like doesn't need hope in the way that Tristan need hope. And Tristan's definition of hope is different. His definition of hope is interaction with people and parties and that kind of things. But I just don't buy this idea that like, I never really had anything to look forward to anyway, so I don't need like hope, or I don't need to feel hopeful about the future. It's like, I don't know, Sveta, I don't think so. And maybe my characterization of her was just inaccurate from the beginning, but I don't think so.
Yeah, I think if you like, she's lived her whole life in this in such a low state of just like struggle, or her whole life that she can remember, that maybe in this moment she legitimately believes like, what do I have to complain about? I have a body finally. I got nothing to complain about. It's all fantastic. Like, I can even kind of relate to this as like being like a kid and being like, I can't complain. My life is great objectively. Mm-hmm. And the thing is like your mind, your brain, your emotions don't give a shit about objectively. They entirely give a shit about relatively and subjectively.
Sure.
Which so like, just because now she has a body, like it takes you about like a week to acclimate to a fantastic piece of good fortune like that, and then you're like, all right, but am I going to keep this? Is this going to keep being good? Is this going to, and what am I going to do with this now? What does this imply? And so I kind of agree, like, yeah, maybe that's been true for her whole life, because her whole life has been this treading water and just having to be okay with nothing that she wanted. But that doesn't mean that's real satisfaction or I'm agreeing with you, definitely.
Yeah. So. No, I get that. Yeah, and I think that's an important distinction, because I don't think it's that she's like knowingly lying to herself or lying to Victoria. I think she fervently wants to believe that's the truth. But I think she's more beaten up about this. Yeah. I have to believe that this is bothering her. I just don't see a Sveta in which this whole interaction would not bother her.
Also, it would just be a little bit strange if this chapter was like, everyone's doing really poorly except Sveta. She's doing great. Like, no, I agree. I mean, Crystal does a similar thing where she's like, oh no, my mom has my back, except she's not my mom. She's a weird flock member who doesn't understand or pay attention to me. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Crystal. Right. We believe you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, Gregor. Sorry,
I just want to say, like, this is when the chapter starts to really dive into this concept of hope, right? Sveta says she doesn't really need it, but that Tristan absolutely does, but that it's more than just hope for himself, like, because part of Tristan's strength comes from delivering hope to other people that he cares about, which again, I think is another connection to Victoria, right? I think that's something Victoria can relate to, bringing hope to people. But in this instance, you can't do that. And this is when Victoria offers leadership, right? It's like, I can't bring him the ability to bring hope to other people. What I can bring him is leadership. So I can solve that problem. And it's like, no, that's not enough, sadly. So
yeah,
I just wanted to draw attention. The rest of this chapter really dives into this concept of hope. And I wanted it really starts here.
Sure. So Gregor comes over and he helps Tristan glue his bridges together, like we talked about. Shamrock and Gregor then tell Sveta that they've been rooting for her. And Sveta takes this about as you would expect.
Yeah.
She after they leave, she says, like, under her breath, basically, you guys couldn't have said that, like, any time before now, or talked to them, or done anything productive.
Does this sound like something a person who's totally fine with all the Case 53 stuff would sound?
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, yeah. It's like she had this brave face on, and then they just like smashed the brave face with a hammer right as she walks up, because it's hitting that nerve exactly there. Yeah, because And to me, that's the intent of this moment, right? Is to just, we have this moment where she puts on this incredibly brave face, and then is confronted with the nature of that disagreement, the whole Case 53 thing again, is she's confronted with it and she immediately like acts like pained and hurt by what they did, or what they didn't do rather. And so it's like, it's obvious this stuff is still bothering her. Of course it is. Like, it's ridiculous to think it wouldn't still bother her. But I think this is just evidence of that. Yeah, I think so.
I also didn't know how to feel about it because, like, at the one hand, I love Gregor and Shamrock. Like, I love them. They're great characters. And when they did this, I was like, oh, that's really sweet. And Sveta was like, yeah, but they didn't do anything. They just said that now. I was like, yeah, good point. But also, what's the expectation here? Like, what would they have done?
Yeah. So I thought about this a little bit, and I was remembering last week we talked about how the Case 53s remind me of fandoms, or really any group. Like, you can just say any group of people.
Yeah.
Once sort of a toxicity is allowed to take root within a culture, a subculture, a group of people, whatever. There's just kill it with fire and run. I don't know what, and basically my point is what should Gregor and Shamrock have done? Because if they were to come and say you guys are being too hard on Sveta, you know what the response would have been. It would have been, oh, you're on her side.
Yeah.
It would have been Shamrock, you're not even a real Case 53.
Yeah.
Gregor, why are you a traitor? And you're siding with Sveta. That's the psychology of it. Is Sveta's imagining that they would have stood up for her and everyone would have been oh, you're right. But no, that's, I mean, we see in Egg's mind exactly how this operates, exactly how this toxicity operates. Mm-hmm. It would just be, oh, so Gregor's a traitor too.
Yeah.
That would be it.
I mean, he already called him a traitor even without doing this. He's a traitor because he was with Faultline.
Yeah.
So I think you're totally right there. Absolutely. It would have been nice for them to have said this to Sveta years ago. I mean, I don't know. There's lots of crazy shit going on. Swinging by Sveta and being like, hey, just so you know, rooting for you.
Right. I mean, because
it might not have worked out.
Right. It's. I mean, it's even kind of condescending if you're just going to say we're rooting for you, but no, we're not going to say anything to the others. Mm-hmm. That's which I think maybe they're even aware of. I mean, we noticed that Gregor doesn't say anything. It's just Shamrock. I almost imagine Gregor being like doing the cut off signal with his hand.
Yeah.
No, don't say that to her. That's not going to help.
Not a good time.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. So speaking of Gregor, there's this moment where Victoria notices Gregor is getting a see-through plastic shirt, and she goes, "You rock your weird, Gregor." I thought, I kind of resented that he was one of my hometown capes who hadn't shown up to Leviathan, but whatever. I wasn't worth holding on to hard feelings. And that's just hilarious to me because it's like Victoria, I'm not holding on to these hard feelings, but it's the first thing I'm going to think about when I see you.
Yeah, I think it's just good psychology of like,
yeah, sure.
we absolutely have biases, and we like see them and acknowledge them, and then we're like, I don't want to have that anymore. But that doesn't mean you don't have it anymore.
Sure. Yeah, she still has it.
I think it's a good like gesture, but
yeah,
she clearly
it's a very good Victoriaism.
Yeah,
I really like it.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So they then see that Ophion and Nemean Titan are approaching with Fortuna following.
Oh, I love the text here, Matt. The slim mountain in the background had eyes now, slivers of and ovals of gold. I could make out the wolf heads. And then, fuck you, Contessa. And I love that it doesn't even say who said that here.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't have to. Obviously, we all know Sveta said that. But I love that moment.
Yeah, me too. So then she retrieves her gun, which
I like how you capitalized gun in the text. I don't know if you did that on purpose, but like the gun has a name now and it's gun and it's personified.
I was gonna name it Wilson actually.
Oh, okay.
So she retrieves Wilson from some very admiring tinkers.
Yeah, they were fucking with Wilson, man.
Yeah, and she gets really mad at them.
But it seems like they helped fix it a little bit.
They seem to have helped fix it. They're extremely like adoring of it. It's kind of cute actually. A little bit of levity in this very heavy chapter.
Yeah.
And then she notes the Undersiders arriving and notes Tattletale shows up and then takes in the scene and then leaves immediately. So
look, the girl knows when she can be helpful on the ground in the field and when she can't. I respect that. She comes out, she knows she can't be any help on the field here, and she says nope, and she Bart's or Grandpa Simpson's right the fuck out the door.
Yeah, it did make me wonder what her power is like now.
Yeah, I mean there's so many open questions about this, right?
Yeah.
Like what does that look like? What does that kind of thinker power look like? Stronger but less like precise.
Yeah.
You know, what does that look like? Is it gonna send her down wrong rabbit holes even more? I don't know.
Yeah,
that's fun.
It's fascinating. Yeah. So Tristan and Byron then experiment with their powers, exploring what happens if they switch while using the power. Mm-hmm. So Byron's power is like this freezing gas, and the swapping mechanics are more complicated than I can go into comfortably. But in general, there seems to be more like projectiles involved.
Yeah. I think it's just fun because you like. It's a very logical, like you kind of see logically how they work through the process, right? Because you see Tristan does his power and then he switches to Byron's power and then sees what that does. And then he switches in the middle of it to see what happens. And then they do it the other way around. And it's just very precise and logical the way they're testing this.
Yeah.
And you just kind of see it play out. But yeah, I mean, let's talk about this a bit. What does this mean? Tristan now makes ruins. Byron now makes a freezing ice cloud. Both seem to be kind of like a combination of the things they made before. Like ruins are like a combination of maybe the metal and the rock, whereas this freezing ice cloud is like a combination of the water and the death cloud that he had at the very beginning. So I mean, what does this mean? Yeah,
and he, like coal has always been a focus of his too.
Yeah,
so it's clearly remixing the same elements. I mean, I feel like I have a better handle on what Tristan's means kind of metaphorically. I don't know what Byron having like a freezing cloud, like it's a lot less, again, less versatile and like utilitarian. Like you can't sweep stuff away with it. You can't kind of launch it into the air and then have Tristan replace it with his stuff. Like it doesn't, like a lot of the things we've seen them do synergistically throughout the story are just not options anymore.
Yeah.
And what they do now, and help me if I say this wrong, but what they do now is when they do switch with their power active, it sort of like creates it just like shoots a projectile of either icy death or rubble.
Yeah, it kind of seems like it. But even the icy death projectile shatters like really easily without seemingly doing anything.
Yeah.
So I think the cloud, Tristan makes a ruin, it shifts to a cloud, and it just falls.
Yeah.
And just shatters. And
yeah,
it does seem generally less synergistic.
Yeah. It's like a kind of more more simple and straightforward in its violence. Like, I'm just thinking of how cool it was before when they would like, one of them would like make the moat and the other would like punch it and it would make like a spike on their gauntlet. And it's like it's almost like the power was there, like trying to help them out. And now it's just kind of like, shooting stuff mainly.
I say all this fully knowing that like in 4 days there could be an action scene where they use these powers synergistically, and it's like, holy shit, I never thought of that before.
That's entirely possible, is that I'm just missing the synergy. But my first impression is like, well, that just seems a lot less useful.
Sure.
And more deadly. Like it mentions like it almost hit some of the people who were nearby.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that stops it is like almost like a panicked switch back to Tristan.
Yeah.
It seems a lot more risky in every possible way. Yeah.
Yep. So then Egg's horrifying godbirds come out and they face down the Nemean Titan. It's funny because the text never actually says that's what it is, but that's what it is.
Well, I mean, sometimes like this is writing, right? Sometimes the ways in which you describe things, like Victoria describing it as bird-like, is that's Wild Bow like showing his hand a little bit. He's like, here's what I want you to think. So he doesn't need to spell it out. Like he doesn't need to have a person in the background say, I think those are eggs. Yeah. We got it.
Right. Yes. They're huge. Like some of them are like, they're not as big as the Titans, but one of them is like as long as one of the Titans. Yeah. And I love that like they're so dumb already that Nemean Titans like dumbifying power doesn't really do anything to them. And so Egg basically holds the Titan at a standstill by himself, which is just fantastic.
What happens? Like, I know like it's basically a portal, right? So like, but what, like, is Egg just off to the side, just chilling, like fully healed?
I mean, maybe. Like my impression is that when these things come out of him, he probably just like is obliterated and then he reforms.
God, you always go the worst possible route. That's terrifying. So where is he? What is he? Where does he exist?
I mean, I think he's just like a splatter of Egg until he kind of draws himself back together, maybe. Like I think the idea is that Egg is probably extremely durable unless his like brain sac gets destroyed, because that's kind of a general principle with these Case-53s, is that they actually do have a brain somewhere. They've just protected it. So yeah, that'd be my guess. He just has like a big orange yolk, which is his brain, and as long as that's fine, then he's okay.
Okay, well that's horrifying. Is that big brainy yolk or yolky brain? Is it conscious? Is it like aware that it's sitting there waiting for the birds to come back?
Oh, I don't know if they have to wait for him to come back. I think he might just heal, and then who the hell knows what the birds do? If they have to go back in, I don't know. I have no idea.
So many questions.
There are a lot of questions. I mean, it's possible they just like disappear or something. We'll see. Or maybe we won't.
I feel like they go back in.
Okay. They just
I feel like they've got to climb
in.
Back in. Yeah.
Well, we did see the littlest one kind of squeeze back in. So
yeah. I'm
excited.
Of course you are.
So then we find out that Chris is lurking nearby and he starts needling Vicky, figuratively, of course.
Yeah, for now.
Yeah, he's being extremely defeatist, and he's talking about how no matter what they do, it will play into Fortuna's hands. Yeah,
and I love this part where he says the cracks spread soon, and Victoria responds, "We're kind of hoping," and he hits back with, "No, you're not." And this is exactly, we kind of go back to this feeling of hopelessness, right? Like hope is something that Tristan needs and has had none. Victoria wants hope real bad, and she's struggling to get it, and Chris is here only offering hopelessness, and he revels in it. We learn a little bit later that Chris wants to be a Titan. It would like be the ultimate goal, like the ultimate end of his goal of monstrousness is being a Titan. And our boy seems a little frustrated that he's not one, right? Yeah. Like, why could that be? He was near one of the cracks, wasn't he? He was near one of the cracks when it all went down. Why, Chris? Why didn't you go Titan then? Could it be that you have some connections to some people that you might not want to acknowledge?
Yeah. Care too much.
But you can't throw off even as hard as you try.
Yeah, not willing to let go of those connections even if part of you wants to. Mm-hmm. A character in conflict. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Yep. This is people asked us like why do you still have faith in Chris? And it seems like this. Like I think this is he is a character in conflict with himself.
Yeah, I think my answer to that question was that he's Chris is a 2-year-old who an evil guy like downloaded his consciousness into, but he's not really that guy. He's tremendously conflicted between sort of different motivations and different versions of himself and who he could be and who he wants to be. And like, generously, he's an adolescent who's still trying to figure out who he is. And that's how he appears. That's how he manifests. That's how he behaves.
Yeah.
So we just are hoping that he decides to be the guy we want him to be and not the guy that he wants to be.
Yeah. And for all his protesting, like, he keeps coming back to Breakthrough. He keeps hanging around them. Why is he here right now?
Yeah.
Why is he next to Victoria, talking to Victoria?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because he's connected to these people and he can't stop himself.
Yeah. So speaking of his relationship to them, in what is almost a conversational non sequitur, he mentions that he could probably give all the Case-53s new bodies with what he knows now. Yeah,
which at first comes off as just like something specifically to piss off Sveta, like just designed to upset her as much as possible. And I think that it is at first, but then he clarifies it, right? He goes on to say, it's not that I always could have fixed you and chose not to. It's just something I've learned recently. Now that we've done the scans of the Titans, we understand the underworkings a little bit more. And now I think that with this new knowledge I have, I could make all those people bodies. It's almost as if like this guy who is convinced about hopelessness is like subtly offering Sveta and the Case-53s hope.
Yeah, he can't help himself. Like he's literally come here to just be a Debbie Downer, and then he ends up, like you said, kind of almost inadvertently giving them hope. And it leads to this great exchange where like they kind of keep doing the thing where they're just kind of needling him back. And he says, you think you're getting one over on me. You get these quips. And then Sveta interrupts. They're very satisfying, like when Kinsey tells you off and you don't have a reply. You get this look on your face, like the mask slips. And then, unfortunately, you put it back on. Jessica had faith in you, you know? I just love that. That's such a great character moment between these two people.
It's so good. It's so good. And this is another reason why. This is why I believe in Chris. And I don't want to give up on Chris yet, because like, he's trying so hard to be nasty. He's trying so hard to push everyone away around him, but he keeps slipping. We keep seeing that mask slip just a little bit. And yeah, like Sveta says, he unfortunately puts it back on, but the hope is that maybe one time he finally won't. And Chris, like, the funny thing is, I think Chris would hear what we're saying about him right now and say we're absurd, right? He kind of does, right? He says the same thing to Victoria. He says, you all think this means more than it does.
Yeah.
And he's right. We probably are thinking this means more than it does. But Victoria's response to that is, it still means something. Mm-hmm. It still means something. And as long as there's that little bit of something there, I'm going to hold on to it. I like this guy. He's a little asshole of a kid, but I want him not to be a monster. And I'm going to hold on to that hope for as long as I think it's there. And I think every time we see him, every time we interact with him, I leave those interactions seeing that little something. And I'm going to hold on to it. Yeah,
I think, you know, I don't know. I'm trying to think of something smart to say about the nature of hope, and just like maybe all you need is a little something. You don't need to be torn in half with conflict. You just need to have that one little niggling voice that refuses to shut up, and that can be enough to kind of pull you into doing the right thing, even if most of you wants to do the wrong thing.
Sure. Yeah.
It's really interesting. So I guess Chris does get the last laugh in, because the cracks begin to grow right when he says many of them through Fortuna in a way that kind of seems intended by her.
Yeah, and we end this like chapter on hope, right? Or the lack of. Yeah. Like the final lines of this chapter is, I hoped he was lying. I hoped he was fucking with us. I hoped we were ready. And then the last line is, hopes extinguished. So like we're bouncing back and forth with this idea of hope, and this idea, like we just talked about how we have hope in Chris. We just talked about how there's hope for the Case-53s, but how much hopelessness is surrounded by this. And I think like this idea of hope, I think we're doing something very specific with this. And like, I love the Tolkienian kind of outlook on hope, right? Tolkien kind of said that true heroism is what you do when all hope is lost, when there is literally no hope. Like, there's no more hope. What do? Like, will you keep fighting? You keep fighting anyway. And that, I mean, I think that's what we're going to see here. I think like how do you react when all hope is lost? The people that, as these cracks spread, the people that are going to keep it together, that are not going to turn into Titans, are people that, despite it being hopeless, still fight.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's sort of the only thing you can do in the face of Contessa, right? Like that's almost what they talked about. Like this idea where Chris says, whatever you do is going to play into her hands, and either Vicky or Sveta is like, well, yeah, if we behave as though that's true, then we do lose. But if we behave as though it's not true and it happens to not be true, that's the only way we can win. So the only option is to behave as though that's not true and to, have hope, basically. I mean, I like it because it's taking this sort of emotional concept of hope and wrapping it in a fun sort of science fiction wrapper, which is my favorite thing.
Sure.
All right. So next chapter, 19.b, Gilpatrick interlude.
Yes.
So Gilpatrick meticulously checks through Rain's old house like a detective, ruminating on the lives of the people who lived here. He seems to take it all in with a kind of somber acceptance, though he's struck by a framed photo that Rain's cousin Allie kept prominently in her room of a swollen and beating face. He later asks Rain about it, and Rain has no idea what it is, who it is. Even then, Gilpatrick kind of demands that Rain at least try to guess. And Rain guesses, but then he concludes that his guess must be wrong, leaving Gilpatrick with no answers. And it just drives the guy crazy. I think it's just fascinating how this guy ticks.
Yeah, I think this is such a wonderful way to characterize this person, and I love it so much. Like, this is a house that Wildbow makes it clear that this house has been empty for a very long time. Like, there's this thin layer of dust on everything, but he still has to check everything. He checks under the beds. He checks everywhere. It's like a tick for him. And I think the scene also does a great job of just reminding us how fucking terrible the Fallen are. We get to see like this spare the child sign above like a beating instrument. I think it's like a leather,
a paddle. I thought,
paddle. Yeah, it's a paddle. You're right. We see, so like it's calling back the Bible verse that's used to justify striking your children, which is awful. And then that picture, is the most interesting part, right? Because it needles at him. It really does. And I think what he says, like the overarching theme of this chapter is Gilpatrick is a person that is aware of the dark things in the corners, right? In the corners of everything, there's this darkness. And the reason this bothers him so much is because it's not in the dark corner. It's out in the open. It's on the bureau. It's right there. And he can't understand that. It's like, it's almost like it's something that doesn't line up with his worldview, and he needs to know why it's there.
Yeah. And he's just staring at it and he's aware that he's being weird. Yeah. But it like clearly deeply, deeply bothers him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love his interaction with Rain here too. It's really, really interesting because like we're going to see throughout this thing as Gilpatrick is a guy that kind of grows to respect this kid. I mean, I think there's this overarching level of pity as he walks through this house and sees how terrible these people are and knows that this is a place where Rain lived. And then, but there's a level of respect here as he sees him as this person that has just like kind of dealt with it, as Aaron said, right? The deal with it guy. We're getting to see Rain from another person's perspective again, and we're seeing him as the deal with it guy because he's talking to him about this photo, and Rain says, like, one way you deal with this is to accept it without flinching, or by doing the opposite of flinching and pretending it doesn't bother you. And that's what that's what Rain says about someone else. Rain would never say that about himself, but then we see Rain talks through all the shitty stuff that's happened with Allie, and Gilpatrick notes that Rain said it all without flinching, like it didn't bother him. So like he's dealt with it. Like that. This is him dealing with it. And I don't think Rain would ever give himself that credit, but through Gilpatrick we see that.
Yeah, that's fascinating, that parallelism there where he has practiced just kind of shouldering all of the darkness in all the corners for so long that he does just do it without letting it bother him. It kind of reminds me of another favorite line from this chapter where the Gilpatrick asks, like, how do they square the fallen doctrine with like the actual Bible? And Rain's like, They just do.
Yeah, right.
Like there's no, I don't know what you want from me, man. Like that,
Yeah.
it's not. You're not gonna get like an answer that's satisfying. And he has Rain himself has long given up trying to like answer these questions. It's just he just has to accept it and soldier on.
And Gilpatrick is not that person, right?
Yeah.
He's a person that's still trying to find the answers to all the questions. Like there is a dark corner to all this, and he wants to shine a light on it. And he has difficulty understanding it. He has difficulty squaring this concept of like he's seen it. He's seen all the terrible things. He's seen the cage people. He's seen his cape friend that was tossed into a barrel. He's seen all this terribleness, and he just can't square it. Like why is this like this?
Yeah, I mean, so like Gilpatrick, he's this kind of like internally messed up person.
Totally.
And like I think he's aware of it. Like he himself thinks of this house clearing ritual that he's going through as being an anxious habit. It's something that he does even to his own home if he hasn't been home in a while. Which like that's a bit much, right? And then this thought of like the thought of doing like a house check just kind of flows organically into this memory of the cage people, which are these like Tinker-built cages containing victims and then like shattering their limbs in the process of moving them around.
It's just awful. Just awful.
It's really great parahumans horror stuff. And then that segues into this memory of this Cape Lucky Break, who was like this kid who he kind of tried to help, and the kid ended up tortured to death in a barrel. And there's like, you can tell from the way this is written that this is a flow of thoughts. Like the reason I'm checking the dark corners of this house is because this is the shit that's out there.
Right. Yeah. And I just don't know. Like, and he's looking at Rain as this person who like knows it's out there, sees it, has sat in those dark corners, and is just like, Yeah. It's just like, got to do what you got to do. It doesn't make sense. You're just going to have to deal with it. And he has trouble with that. And I think he respects Rain for his ability to do that a little bit.
Yeah, I think so.
And yeah, so I mean, I think like there's a lot, like he pities him for the stuff he's had to go through, but he respects him as the person who's dealt with this stuff and come out the other side of it. He compares him to Lucky Break a lot. I think we're going to get a specific example of that in a bit, but it's their interaction is fascinating to me. And what more I want to see out of this interlude is the two of them interacting with each other. What he learns through this experience. I can't wait to see. Me
too. That's going to be awesome. So we spent a little bit of time getting acquainted or perhaps reacquainted with Marshall and Gaiman, two specific of these PRT, these patrol block folks. There's a few others there who don't get so much characterization. Gaiman is especially prickish as Rain does his best to brief everyone on the dream room. And Marshall is a badass.
Yeah, we learn Gaiman is the anti-parahuman person a little bit after this, I think. And he's pushing back. He's not thrilled. And Marshall is not like terribly thrilled about this whole thing too. Like she's not near as prickish as Gaiman is, but she's kind of pushing back on Rain's stuff too. And the entire time Gilpatrick's like totally got Rain's back. And I think it's important that we kind of, to help establish Gilpatrick as this kind, caring guy who genuinely wants to help and is on Rain's side. It's important to contrast with him with people. And I think Gaiman is like the perfect person to do that. You draw this character that's just this asshole, hates parahumans, doesn't want to be here, not happy about any of this stuff. But now we see Gilpatrick as compared to him.
Yeah, and we also see, I mean, I thought it was kind of great how anyone would notice that Gaiman is being rude, and Rain is like, it's debatable whether he even notices, and if he does notice, he's just not reacting at all to it.
He just fucking deals with it, man.
Yeah, he's just like whatever.
Just soldiers on.
Yeah.
Just dealing with it.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, like, this is like the shit he's had to put up with in his life. This is just nothing. So
yeah. This is also a good time to remind ourselves that 2 chapters ago we learned that there were some body snatchers that were going to infiltrate the dream. We know that they were down there. That's what Egg got told at the very end of his interlude. So immediately we're kind of like, which one of these fuckers?
Yeah.
And I mean, the thing that I think it does smart is that it trots out Gaiman and drops him here as this asshole, and we're like immediately like paying attention to him because we're like, I bet it's this fucker. It's definitely this guy. And we should note that Cox and Valentine, the two that eventually are revealed to be our body snatchers, are characterized in this scene a little bit. Like they both get speaking lines. We draw attention to them very subtly, but because they're not specifically pushing back on Rain, our attention is not drawn to them. Our attention is drawn to Gaiman. And so we're paying attention to him a little bit more. And therefore, Wildbow's kind of like showing his hand, but just doing a little misdirect.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah, I mean, it does feel like a card trick, right? Like is this your card? Nope, it's over here, you know? Yeah.
Yep.
I love this interaction where Gilpatrick, like you said, he's trying to be supportive. It says, Gilpatrick put a hand on the boy's shoulder. We're on your side. We're with you in this. Rain barely seemed to take in the feedback, where LB had reacted so strongly to every praise and condemnation, brimming with sensitivity and reception. Victoria, by another stark contrast, had barely seemed to notice things that made or broke other people's moods for the day, but one innocuous Q could see her retreating to her office. Like the thing that stood out to me about this is like, Gilpatrick is such a complex, cool, multidimensional character because he's got this kind of almost traumatized anxiousness about him that kind of compels him to check out the dark corners. But the way that this manifests is that he's trying to take care of these people, right? Like he had LB, Lucky Break, he had Victoria, and now he's sort of extending this to Rain. And this is like why he's in the position he's in, is he kind of tunes into these people and tries to see how they tick, and then he tries to help them. And like this is such a great kind of look into Victoria. It's really clear that this guy had a really strong sense of her and how to help her.
Oh hell yeah! I mean that is vintage Victoria, right?
Yeah.
Like that's one innocuous cue could see her retreating to her office. That's perfect. Exactly. That's what happens to Victoria. I think it's really interesting. First of all, I love that he calls him LB because that's just like a perfect patrol block thing that you would you would shorten his name, right? Yeah. But the ways in which LB is specifically contrasted to Rain here is really interesting because Lucky Break ended up dead and Rain is a survivor. And I think that's the one thing that's where I mean, where I say like, I think there's some respect being drawn up from Gilpatrick for this kid. Because he is a survivor. He's gone through all this terrible stuff. He's been in the worst dark corner you could imagine, and he's come out of it. And he's still going on, and he's not letting this stuff bother him, and he's trucking forward, and he's trying his best, and he's leading this group, and there's some respect there for sure. And it's respect. It's like this combination of respect and pity that, you're right, makes Gilpatrick like want to take care of this guy. He wants to keep him out of those dark corners. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Even as they're about to go into one.
Yeah, it just makes him overall a fleshed out character who we immediately just love.
Yeah. All right.
Cool. So then they enter the dream. They are first subjected to Love Lost Dream, a vignette that we haven't seen yet, where Evelyn rages at Love Lost, telling her that she would rather have her mom be a drunk than a police detective. And that she's aware of the toll that the job took on her mom. Mm-hmm. One new element that stands out to me particular here is that Love Lost tells her daughter, I get it now, just before her daughter is killed in the dream again. Yeah.
So there aren't many things that I enjoy in this book more than this ongoing saga of Love Lost, Matt. I don't know what it is about this character and the way in which her story is told, but just the little vignettes we've seen of her through the dream room. I just love this character, and I love this tragedy that we see in this character. And this latest bit of it is just more of the same. I just love all of this. I mean, it's devastating. It breaks my heart, but I love it. It's such good storytelling.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen her really develop actually in little tiny driblets of story over time. And here at this point, I think she's come kind of to a full acceptance of things that she was reluctant to accept earlier in the story, especially when she was being an awful villain. But
yeah, and it's interesting. It feels balanced to me. Like one of the things I've talked to you about this before, but I feel like sometimes like this too much of the story goes by where we don't deal with Chris. So a lot of times, like he seems like he's one of the core breakthrough characters. I always want more Chris. I want more of him in the story. But for Love Lost, it always feels to me like she's in it just the perfect amount. Like she just kind of comes and slips back into the story. We're learning a little bit about more her, and then it goes a different direction. Mm-hmm. And then it'll eventually loop back to her in this very natural kind of way. And then we'll go off and do something else. And it's always felt like the sweet spot. We're getting just enough of this character, I feel.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right. And I agree with you about always wanting more Chris as well.
Okay, but there are some specific things that I wanted to highlight in this dream because I think there's a lot of interesting stuff going on here. First, as Gilpatrick is getting ready for the dream, he's kind of going through his mind and thinking about capes and thinking about the stuff in those dark corners. And one of the things he references is wizard parahumans, like this wizard type of parahuman. And then we go into the dream and we see this scene, a scene that we had never seen before. And at the start of this dream, Everly is talking to her mom about what she would do if she has powers. And Ever says, I'd be all wizardy, I think, even if I didn't have wizardy powers. Now, we know that Ever is like all into magic and sorcery and fantasy. So like this is not an abnormal thing for her to say. Like it's not like out of the ordinary for her to use a word like wizardy. But whenever you have this word repeated twice so close together, it gets my attention. And therefore my brain starts turning, and my hypothesis around this whole thing is now that like Gilpatrick and possibly all the humans' presence in this dream is influencing it in certain ways. Maybe not the same way in which Colt's presence influenced it, but perhaps Gil like going to sleep and thinking right before he goes to sleep about wizardy capes, like was processed as a command by the shard computer or whatever, and just said, wizardy, okay, let's go to my files and find memory that has the word wizardy in it, and we'll play that one. It's just like, I don't know if that's true, but it seems like that's a very big possibility.
I love that. I mean, I think the word wizard doesn't appear in this book that many times.
Yeah, exactly.
So the co-occurrence of it in that way, I think is certainly suggestive. And yeah, I mean, it definitely is consistent with all the rules that we've been led to accept about the way the dream room kind of integrates information from the different people. And there's one element we didn't talk about either, which is that at one point Love Lost, like it's clearly modern day Love Lost thoughts filtering through to what Dream Love Lost is saying, because Everlyn doesn't respond to it.
Yeah, she said, I'd claw into their stomachs, feel their guts hot between my fingers, and drag the contents out of the wound, because you don't get powers without something bad happening to you. And I don't think there are many things that could push me that far without me wanting revenge of some sort. And Gilpatrick says in that moment that the words he's hearing don't line up with her lips, which is exactly what you're saying, is that this is not something she, in this memory, this dream memory, this is not something that she actually said to Ever. But it is something she's saying now. And where is that coming from, right? Is that the influence of one of the other humans doing that? Is that just Colt's influence on the dream? What is that coming from? Because that's new. I don't think we've seen it. No. We've seen the dreams shift and change over time. We haven't seen that kind of direct influence to where other people can hear her thoughts.
Yeah. One interesting thing is this is the first time we've been in here since Cradle was dead.
Yeah.
So he's not around warping everything, because if I recall, he was actually kind of planting seeds and pushing things along certain tracks using his lucid dreaming skills.
Sure, yeah.
So just maybe that's just, I mean, there's a ton of different elements in play here that could make it, that could be the explanation, right?
Yeah, but I think you're right. I mean, the end of this dream is almost this moment of reconciliation where she says to her daughter before she dies, I get it now. I understand the things I just witnessed, the dream I just witnessed. I understand. And so like we start kind of putting all these hypotheses together. If other people are influencing this dream, if the reason why this particular dream, this particular memory happened today is because of the inadvertent influence of other people, then Gilpatrick and the others might have helped Loveloss get to a point of reconciliation, or at least a point of understanding, of finally understanding what her daughter meant. And like, obviously that's not going to bring her daughter back. That's not going to assuage her guilt for what happened. But it is a moment where at least you get it now. At least you can look back and say, I get it. I get what I get it. I understand.
Right.
And I think that's so important.
Sure. Well, because I remember distinctly, we've talked about this before, the idea that the kind of the nightmarishness of the dream room, if you will, is that it like tortures you with these memories night after night after night, and keeps them fresh and reminds you of why you hate, and never lets you get over the thing. I think memory is a huge theme of this story that I don't know why that hadn't clicked for me until today, basically. But I was like, this story does so much with memory, and the dream room is one of the main places where it does that, because, you know, we talked about this idea recently that Victoria wants to, or she might say yes if someone offered to take away her memories. Yeah. And here we have a situation where they're being subjected to these memories night after night after night. And the thing is that prior to now, Loveloss has always been subjected to them in a way that just made her, reminded her of what she'd lost, and used that to reinforce her hate and her violent tendencies. And finally, this is the first time that it's sort of being used in what you could almost call a therapeutic way, where it's like, sure, look at this and reprocess this, and maybe come out of this feeling a little bit more at peace than you did going into it. Yeah, I totally. It kind of reminds me of that Ted Chiang short story we read about, you know, how memory could be useful but also distorting, and just the complicated nature of that, because it's not, it's memory. It is naturalized memory, but also like shard based memory, right? So it's like an alien computer system recalling something, which is different. I think different from just normal recall. Which we have a lot of that in the story. We have Chris, we have Ashley, who both have these memories that were basically stored and then put back into them. We have Victoria, who has these traumatic memories, but then she also has memory blocks. Yeah. We have Sveta, whose whole life was erased. I mean, I think the only member of Breakthrough who hasn't had his memory completely fucked up would be Capricorn in general. Yeah, but I wonder if we could, I mean, it's not memory specifically, but I wonder if we could, I don't know, I feel like we could explore that. I don't want to do it right now because it would just be me sitting here silent thinking for 5 minutes. Yeah. But I wonder if we could explore that. Kinsey has her holograms, which are actually reconstructions. They're not actually memories. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is we'll just now that we've identified this, I think it'll be fun to maybe carry forward with us. Yes. So the people appear in the dream room. Gilpatrick immediately notices that Valentine doesn't look right. They're all jumbled up and striped, almost like Matryoshka. And then Cox is a little girl. Well, that's weird. Probably nothing to read into that at all. Yeah, I hope whoever Cox was is okay somewhere. Nope. Probably not. Yeah, so this is obviously Bijou and Matryoshka, right? These are our Case 53 infiltrators. I don't think there's a lot of doubt to be left here. But like looking back and reading this again after you the book makes it pretty definitively clear that that's the case. It's really funny almost because they both look really strange, and everyone's like, Cox, what the hell? And he's just not able to come up with a lie quickly enough. He's just like, and then Valentine, Matryoshka, maybe is a little bit quicker thinking and says, I'm biracial, which gives Cox just enough time to come up with his, I was thinking about my niece. Which is like, I think that only works as an excuse because everyone is really, really distracted. Yeah. Because I don't think that's how it works at all. Like it's how you see yourself, not like, just like, I was thinking about the Cookie Monster, so I turned into the Cookie Monster. Well, see, and also we know that because we've seen this happen. But they might just be like, oh, okay, sure. I mean, I think Rain is the only one that definitively knows it out of this group of people. Yeah. And he's got a lot going on. Right. So, and like, what are you like? There's priorities, right? They'll deal with this later. Yeah. Sure. I love, Marshall held an automatic rifle on top of body armor she wore. A smirk crossed her face. So, Marshall is Coiled Sniper confirmed. I don't know about that, Matt. That would be funny though.
She definitely does recite the Rifleman's Creed from Full Metal Jacket like constantly though.
Yeah,
right?
I'm sure that was happening. That was her meditation actually. Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
I think definitely her and Victoria should like get together and talk about how much they love their guns.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay.
Gaiman, on the other hand, has no gun.
Oh, bummer.
Marshall almost gives him her second gun, which of course she brought in, but instead gives it to Love Lost, new favorite character.
Yeah, one dream sequence, and she can already tell that Love Lost is like worth 12 Gaimans.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
We also, I think this moment where Rain like realizes that like a giant rage shard monster might not be the best thing to go up against with guns. It's like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. Because what if it makes you hate each other?
Yeah.
And then you shoot each other. So everyone's just like, okay, I guess we just got to empty our clips into this thing before we even move. So what are we naming this thing?
Oh, I don't know.
What it was Mr. Happy was the other one, right? No, Mr. Hugs.
Mr. Hugs. Right? Yeah, well, we don't have Chicken Little here, so I don't know how we can possibly come up with a name.
Yeah, they should have just brought Chicken Little in.
Anger Wolf.
No.
Okay.
It would be something cooler than that.
Oh.
We'll think about it.
Okay.
Maybe that's a discussion question.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely definitely it. So Gilpatrick chooses to frame this whole event as a crash course in being parahuman, which I think he's probably going to end up being more right than he knows.
For sure. I think, like, outside of the fact that he's about to become a parahuman, most likely, I think there's just this really, like, we framed Gil as this guy who, like just doesn't quite, he knows, he's seen the darkness in the corners of these rooms, and he's just constantly had trouble processing it, right? He's just constantly like how do you deal with it? How do you survive it? How do you live a normal life with this? And then he's forced to go through this thing. And when Breakthrough and the Undersiders went through the dream room, they learned a lot about each other. And like, this was a moment like of where the walls finally came down, like where I think the best example of that is Tattletale and Victoria kind of seeing each other, or at the very least, Victoria sees Tattletale for maybe the first time. Mm-hmm. And so we have Gil, this guy who's always kind of appreciated parahumans, and he's wanted to help them and protect them. And he's seen the dark corner, but he's never really had to like it's just different, right? It's different for parahumans. Yeah. And now he's gone through that, and he's seen not only the darkness, but what's on the other side of the darkness, which is you're expected to now fight this thing. Mm-hmm. And he gets it. And the first thing he does after he gets it is he looks at Love Lost and he says, "My condolences. Like, I'm sorry what you went through. I'm sorry what you had to go through." And I don't know. I just think that's a really powerful moment. That moment where like he's seen all this, he's gotten this crash course in parahumans, he's seen how terrible it is, and he looks at Love Lost, this villain who's killed people, who's done terrible, terrible things, and he just says, "Hey, I'm sorry. That sucks. That sucks that you had to go through that."
Yeah, yeah. I agree that was a powerful and possibly even important moment. Mm-hmm. I think people in the Discord were saying, like, is that the first time anybody has ever said that to Love Lost?
Oh, it might be.
And
surely Rain said something.
I mean, the thing is, I don't know if he would have said it like that way, because he's responsible for it, basically. So him saying "my condolences" is a bit.
Yeah, he definitely wouldn't say "my condolences." Right. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, just like the idea of just like a kind of very simple human connection offered out to her in this way seems important to me.
And then, of course, you've got people like Gaiman, who it doesn't matter. Like, their eyes were closed. Even witnessing the dream is probably not enough to get them to understand. Yeah.
Well, I have a feeling something's about to get him to understand.
Yeah. Maybe if you just, trigger.
Yeah. I like when one of the rookies points out that Cox was like off before they entered the room. Like the name tag didn't look right. And Gilpatrick's like, "That's the kind of thing you mentioned sooner."
Yeah, and it's like going on in the middle of gunfire and counting down, and like it's being broken up where he can only barely hear it, and like it's like, I just thought it was a typo.
Yeah.
It's a really great moment. Like it really helps sell these are definitely the body snatchers type of moment.
Also, I mean, maybe it's the SCP lover in me, but I just love the stories from the perspective of the grunts in these hell worlds where they absolutely know that if one letter is off on a name tag, that's a huge red flag, and it's an emergency basically.
Sure.
It's just so good. So after the team empties their weapons into Lovelost's agent, they all run, but all the non-parahumans are felled by the thing's psychic type attack.
Yeah, and it's kind of weird how Cox and Valentine are somehow just immune to the attack that only works on non-parahumans.
So weird. I honestly wonder how long they're going to pretend,
Yeah, it's like, I mean, because the text notices that, we assume that Gilpatrick does as well, right?
Yeah.
So he's definitely going to have some questions for these two.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like the cat's out of the bag, but they have no choice but to move forward with the mission, right?
Yeah, sure.
So the power digs into Gilpatrick, more than just an emotion power, but a power that uses emotions, connects them together, understands triggers. He remembers that Colt was added to the cluster late, when in proximity to Lost, as it happens.
Yeah.
Which is a nice little connection.
Yeah. Oops.
Not something I'd put together, actually.
Yeah. To tie into the last chapter, I think it's like almost as if the shard weaponizes this concept of hopelessness, right? And he triggers, and presumably they all trigger. I'm not 100% sure on this. Like I'm pretty sure the way this is written, they're triggering, but I'm not like 100% sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I'm not, I said earlier to you, I'm 90% sure. So
sure. Yeah, I mean, like
pretty sure.
Then he saw nothing except abstract images, a glimpse of a world beyond stars, and the wells of power he might not live to tap into. And so, like, one read is that he's just getting a glimpse at those wells of power. He's not actually going to have access to them. He's just getting the trigger vision, because I think the argument is he's getting a trigger vision because it seems that this shard is like part of how triggering works generally, like part of the system. But it seems like he's going to trigger, right?
I think so. I mean, I have for a long time actually thought that it would be a really interesting story choice if we saw an anti-parahuman trigger. Mm-hmm. And I think we may have even talked about the potential of Gary triggering, and like, just wouldn't that be an interesting story idea? You have this person who now has to struggle with this, and what impact does it have on their thinking and their relationships, and it's the kind of idea where I was like, man, that would just go so well in this story.
Sure.
And we established Gaiman as a pretty, bold anti-parahuman. And I think that if he doesn't trigger here, I will be surprised, put it that way.
I think we said when it was Gary, I think my response was that would be like too on the nose. Like the leader of the anti-parahuman movement turning into a parahuman. That's like, it's like 1999 X-Men where they turned that guy into a mutant. Remember?
I do.
It seems like too on the nose.
It was great. What do you mean?
No, that's a bad movie. Watch that movie again. It's a bad movie. But I think like creating this character, establishing this character as part of that anti-parahuman squad, and then putting him through this does absolutely seem like something Wild Will would want to explore.
Yeah.
So I tend to agree with you. I think all these people have the potential to trigger, and they're all like being faced with the trigger shard almost. So it certainly makes sense. I mean, the interesting part is, what's this going to look like? Like they're in the shard world dream room thing, right? Like they're in the computer almost. What does that look like?
They won't have their powers in here, I'm pretty sure. I mean,
they shouldn't.
That would be a fun twist if they somehow did. I mean,
yeah.
Whatever, right? The rules are the rules are whatever. So but yeah, I mean, I think that like the saddest thing would be like some of them don't make it out, and we never get to see what their power is. But
yeah, well, I mean, I feel like a good. I mean, the end of this chapter is like he wouldn't live to see it. So it's like there's a strong indication that some of these could be broken triggers, right? And what does that do? Like, and as this is too early in our timeline for this to be the bomb explosion. and it's too early in our timeline. So therefore, it's too early in our timeline for this to be the crack spreading, right? So this is not going to be like a cascading event that affects the outside world. Because we would have seen it, right?
Yes. Pretty sure that like all of the fighting with the whole ground invasion is after this.
Yes.
Or like sort of contemporary with this, but this is toward the beginning of it.
Yeah. So, it's gonna be interesting. I can't wait to see what it is. I like the idea of Gaiman being a cape. I like the idea of Gilpatrick being a cape and seeing how that interacts with Rain. Maybe it helps him finally find a way to deal with those dark corners.
Yeah.
But it's rough hopelessness.
Or he's gonna get a power that makes the dark corners like way more horrible.
Oh God, everything's a dark corner.
Yeah, it's. I mean, the power is not going to help him.
No, certainly not. Certainly not.
Okay. I love that interlude. I love Gilpatrick. I kind of always loved Gilpatrick, but it was great being in his head.
It's just great, like getting a handle on this guy who just seems like this genuinely decent person.
Yeah.
Who's just struggling. Like he's a perfect stand-in for just humanity almost. Yeah. Like he's just this guy who has seen all this terrible shit and is struggling to understand it and struggling to understand the people that are forced to go through it, and wants to help them as much as he can.
Yeah, I mean, he's already a hero. He is. So it's fitting.
And I hope he gets to do more heroism and not turn into a horrible shard monster.
Me too. Speaking of horrible shard monsters, the discussion question from last week was, who's your favorite Case-53 that is not Sveta?
Are you calling them horrible shard monsters?
No, that wasn't what I meant.
That's terrible.
I'm sorry to any Case-53s that are listening. That was not what I intended. All right. Killer Kino and Isaac G1 both said Casey Forks, the mold-based broken trigger who was included as a Case-53 post-Gold Morning. First of all, that last part is wild, that the irregular community is so insular that they reject someone like Sveta for making a high-pressure decision they disagree with, but they decide to include someone who hasn't really experienced any of their hardships simply because they are transformed. Then we have to take a look at how Casey describes their power. I grew mold on my dad's body and I could make him move. I grew mold on his brain and I got him to think. And with his thinking, I finally got the generator and the router and the phones working. It helped that I grew mold on the pieces and parts. Now I am making my sister type. And then they go on to say, at first glance, it seems like this is just control over bodies, but it seems to go much farther. Casey mentions becoming a god of death, and that seems way more accurate. The dad even thinks after death. Basically, this is like a whole new level of restoring access to like a person after they're dead, forming a network and having access to their knowledge and skills even after death. This is something kind of beyond even what like Kepri and Valkyrie were capable of.
Yeah. This is I love this answer. I'd totally forgotten about this kid. The funny thing for me is normally when multiple people answer the same, I pull them independently, as you will see by the 7 Gregor the Snail answers we got this week. But the reason I pulled these collectively and just used Killer Kino's answer is because independent of each other, Killer Kino and Isaac both grabbed the same two things. Uh-huh. The idea that Casey is invited into the Case-53 community where Sveta isn't, and the god of death idea of his power and how crazy that is. They both, I mean, and granted, he's a very minor character that's only around very briefly, so there's not a huge pool of things to pull from in regard to him, but they made posts that were super similar to each other. So I just they both looked at this character and arrived to the same general conclusions. It was really interesting.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, that's funny.
All right, next we have Ace of Sword, who says, "You fucked up there," meaning us and how we framed the question. "It's not Sveta you should have taken out of competition. Now you might as well change the question to, who is your Case-53 and why is it Gregor the Snail? Because Gregor is the best. He might honestly be the most wholesome character in the story. At that point, I'm pretty sure he isn't even able to hate people. He's just a good dude who puts his friends before himself, and I'm so happy that he seems to be one of the few people in the Wormverse who's going to be in a happy and stable relationship. He deserves it." To clarify, I think why we said that's not Sveta, I didn't think it was necessarily because everyone was going to choose Sveta, although I I did think quite a few people would, but I feel like we talk about Sveta a lot. And I kind of wanted this question to be like, let's talk about some people we don't talk about that much.
Yeah. Spotlight on the background characters. Exactly.
Yeah.
Sure. I agree. And Gregor is fantastic.
As the next like 6 answers, just spoilers, are Gregor.
Okay. All right. Moving on. Penitent Edgelord says, Gregor the snail. They say Gregor's interlude is one of the parts of Worm they remember most fondly, largely because of how well realized Gregor felt as a character. His worldview and mindset were established beautifully. His apparent wisdom comes across as hard-earned, and he still struggles with his identity as a monster. On top of this, he comes across as self-aware without being excessively self-aware. His dry humor is genuinely funny, but he remains earnest and decent no matter who he's dealing with. Finally, he delivered one of the most emotionally impactful moments early Worm when he tries to help Faultline overcome the Manthan effect. A lot of people cite the Leviathan attack as the point where they knew that they were with Worm for the long haul. I knew I was hooked by the end of Gregor's interlude.
That's great. Love it.
Yeah, I love that idea that like I think one of the things that made me hooked on Worm was actually not specifically Gregor, but the fact that Wildbow was able to jump in and out of different people's heads, different characters' heads so deftly that I was just like, oh, like he's a fucking writer. I get it. Okay, I'm in for this. Yeah.
Yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah. Muse of Doom 2 says Gregor the Snail, a true gentleman with a heart of gold who proved that you don't need good looks to be an awesome human being. True that.
Yeah. MC White Thunder says, I love Gregor the Snail. He has such little screen time aside from early Worm, but he's always been very good-hearted. Remember when he strangled Faultline to try to induce a second trigger or a breakthrough, not caring if he were maimed because he would rather she had better powers than he has an arm? I really love his background arc of becoming more confident and accepting Shamrock's affection, seeing her as more than just a chaser. Add that to the fact that he has one of the absolute coolest and most versatile powers in parahumans, the ability to generate and spray large amounts of chemical compounds. You can do so much with that. He practically has free containment foam, Scott.
You're right, MC White Thunder. You're right. Favorite character, Gregor. Done.
Yeah, I thought so.
All right, next we have Cutie Alice, who says, it's got to be Gregor. Like he is for Egg, Gregor's kind of an aspiring figure for me. I've never been happy about my appearance, and the way Gregor's made peace with his is endearing. He knows it doesn't make him happy. He knows he can't change it, but he knows that there's more to life than that, and he lives by that philosophy. Every scene and interaction with Gregor paints a picture of a kind, empathetic man who is willing to go the extra mile for anyone he cares about, and willing to give a chance to anyone he doesn't. Strong, stoic, but not without a sense of humor. Gregor the Snail is who I strive to be. That's a great answer, Alice. Thank you.
That's beautiful. Fantastic. Yeah. Ethical Ham Jimmies says, despite having pretty limited screen time, I really like Neuter. He seems like a cool, fun, carefree dude who couldn't be happier giving his drug saliva to some party girls in a nightclub. But I always sense the deeper tragedy to the fact that he is essentially Rogue from X-Men. He can never really touch anyone. It has been explained, it hasn't been explored much at all, but I've definitely headcanoned that as a thing.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I mean, and also he's one of the ones with a pretty monstrous appearance, but he seems to just have such a like flippant attitude about it, where to me that always seems like it's covering the pain, you know?
Yeah. Up next, we have Cautious Crow, who says, I'm going to have to go with my girl, Shamrock. I was absolutely intrigued by her all throughout Worm as a Case 53 who seemed to be visually normal, and I loved the way that Palanquin's own quest to find out more about Cauldron would slowly unfold in the background throughout the story. Beyond that, even before Sveta got a body, Shamrock was a perfect example of a member of a minority community that seemingly had it easier than many others, such as someone who lacks a visible disability or someone who is trans but passes perfectly. Despite this, she actually retains her memories of the horrors inflicted on her, making her potentially more damaged than some of the other Case 53s, just in ways that are less obvious. Despite this, she has managed to find happiness and is one of the few happy stable relationships in the parahuman universe, which has managed to last upwards of 3 years. That's got to be like a Cape record. Plus, I think her power is a pretty cool take on a domino-style luck-based power set in the parahumans universe. Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, I think the Egg interlude kind of touched on this idea of a person who is a member of this community, but like seemingly doesn't have to deal with the same things that they do, and how that relationship like changes and complicates the ways that she interacts with that community.
Yeah, it makes it so that she doesn't really feel that she fits in with non K53s, but she also doesn't feel like she quite fits in with the K53s, and that's tragic in its way.
Yeah.
Wonderfulness. Sorry, go ahead.
Also, these people keep talking about this successful relationship, and just like you're dooming it.
Yeah,
everyone.
I literally had the same thought.
One of them's gonna die.
I was like, oh no, please no. Okay, Wonderfulness says, it's unclear if he's a K53, but I have to go with Bijou. I immediately recognized her as my favorite Word of God cape, the locked-in girl. She's fascinatingly creepy and tragic at the same time.
And now she's a dude named Cox.
Yep, I think I'd read the locked-in girl thing before and been highly disturbed by it, so glad that's in the story now. That's good.
Hooray! Sarah Penguin says, I'm going with a tentative Hexie. Loved her description, and I'm sucker for a witch's hat. I just hope she doesn't do something stupid because Egg wants it. Yeah, she's probably going to do something stupid because Egg wants it.
Yeah, I think we're heading that way.
Yep.
Wolf Tamer says, Neuter. Fuck yeah.
Short and sweet.
Mm-hmm.
The Cool Noob says, I miss Gully. I'm pretty sure that was her name. The girl with the giant shovel who showed up at the Echidna fight. She seemed cool. Does anyone know what happened to her? We don't actually know what happened to Gully, Matt. I think back in Arc 13, they see a picture of her. I think it's when they're at the creepy guy who takes the pictures of K-33s.
Oh, yeah.
Sveta just says Gully isn't around anymore. And that's really all we know about her. She's just not around anymore. So
okay. Yeah, for some reason, if you'd asked me, I would have said that she died in the Cauldron base. But yeah, okay. I don't know.
I think it's like, I looked it up because honestly, I couldn't remember. This was not from memory, guys. I definitely looked this up. She was injured in the Cauldron stuff, but was carted away by Pretender.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Interesting. That's ominous.
So just, yeah.
Where the fuck is Pretender? Where the fuck is...
Wait, isn't Pretender dead?
Well, okay, look. Where's God, what's his name? Satirical. Where's Satirical, Scott?
I don't know, Matt.
Okay. All right. Vice Versailles says it was Weld up until recently. His interlude back in Worm painted a really wonderful picture of a really interesting character. Physically strong, but buckling under the weight of expectations set by his background and position that he just can't fully carry when he's been a young adult his whole life. His mind reads young. His veneration of Director Armstrong as a surrogate father figure, how he hangs on to every word of advice given to him, his discomfort at being called a brute, but his lack of courage to protest it, and eventually his defeated, I just got here, after the meeting with his new team goes wrong. All of it makes him out to be a poor kid being forced to grow up too fast. The first thing we see him do as he's flying in to round out the Brockton Bay Awards team is grasp desperately to the data packet provided to him to see if it will make up for his lack of experience. In D&D parlance, trying to make up for a negative wisdom with positive intelligence. It's the kind of thing we all go through growing up, and because of his circumstances as a K-53, he's literally having to start from square one rather than just feeling like it. Juxtapose that with his brute power and the damage he might do if his finger slips near some alloy, and the resulting walking on eggshells outlook. Loaded word choice for this episode, I know. And it certainly had me rooting for him. But now, in Ward, Weld's not looking too good. I got the returning character grin seeing him with Sveta when they were reintroduced together, and while representing the Wardens in Crystal Clear's interlude. But after he just keeps getting shadier and shadier, especially with this new stunt to throw Sveta underneath the K-53's party bus so he can get back in on it. If he's not careful, I might have to start gushing about Gregor like everyone else.
I like this answer a lot because I think if we had asked this question a month ago, a lot more people would have said Weld. Mm-hmm. And just a lot of the very recent stuff with Weld has really tainted a lot of people's opinions of him. And I'm kind of there too. Like I've liked Weld a lot in Worm. I've wanted to like Weld a lot in this book, but he's just struggling. He's just struggling. And
yeah.
It's really hurting.
Right. I don't, like, in my opinion, I don't see him as like, oh, he has fallen from grace. I see it more as like, yeah. he has revealed to me that he's probably kind of cracking under the strain more than, like, he's really good at covering it up. That's almost his whole MO, is like seeming invulnerable. But he's not.
So I've just Matt, I've just received a message. This is live breaking news. Gully is dead.
Okay.
She just died just now. So
Gully's
dead. So
okay. Good to know.
All right, next up we have Death of the Artist, who says, "Yo, Taylor, I'm really happy for you. I'm going to let you finish, but Hunch has to be one of the best Case 53s of all time. It's bad is one of the funniest lines in Worm, easily. I wanted to know what his powers are so badly." I had to look up who this was because I did not even remember it. So that's my response to this.
I think I have a vague visual memory of what Hunch looks like. But
do they have a hunch?
I think they have a hunch.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. No, I don't remember that very well either. Okay.
All right.
Extas Nouveau says Nyx with a Y, for several reasons. She has a cool optic, red skin, and steaming slits all over her body. As a Slaughterhouse 9 member, she likely has an interesting and terrifying backstory. She has a cool power that is versatile and dangerous. Remember, she makes that toxic smoke stranger stuff.
Yep.
There's an interesting duality with Nyx, her twin. I thought it was her twin, who has a similar name and power. One of them is a hero and one a villain. One is not a Case 53. The other is Case 53. Mm-hmm. They're probably both Cauldron Capes, and we have seen that their powers are probably related. So there's probably a cool story hidden. It's funny because I totally have, I'm just realizing now reading this that I have a fully formed headcanon that one of them took the Cauldron Vial and then they both triggered or something like that and caused one of them to be a Case 53 and the other one. Yeah. I'm sure it's funny because there's no evidence of that. But that's where my brain went.
Hey, you just grab those theories and hold on to them until they're proven wrong. So that's how you do this whole literary analysis thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's how I've been doing it so far, so I hope so.
All right, next up we have Lost Man 138, who says, "Weld, because I get the sense that he's a great soldier, but a terrible leader." And I think that's extremely fair.
Yeah, that's the most condensed form of what we've been saying, yeah.
Yeah.
A Hero of Old Iron says they're going to go with Custodian. Oh, good answer. Not really sure why, but she just has a vibe that I find really potent. She's from Earth C, and from what I can tell, she was a second-class citizen there. After that, she joined Cauldron and was likely instrumental in building their facility. And even after Gold Morning, she stuck around with Teacher to keep things running. In their fight, Contessa diverted her by pointing out that Teacher would significantly damage or even destroy the facility if it meant containing the situation. I see her as someone who had very little, having her whole physical existence taken from her. From that point on, she's forced to be both more and less than a person, dedicating the rest of her existence purely to the thing that she's built. In 1,000 years, if humanity survives that long, people will still talk about a foreboding maze of absolutely pristine hallways haunted by the ghosts of its builders. Very cool, IMO.
Yeah,
I agree.
very cool. For some reason, I hadn't, in my brain hadn't filed Custodian as a Case 53, but of course.
Yeah.
Of
yeah,
course.
right. It's Doormaker and Clairvoyant would also qualify, but you don't think of them because they work for Cauldron. So
yeah, maybe that's the difference. It's just that because they're on the Cauldron side, that I just filed them in my brain somewhere different. But
makes sense.
I think that's a great answer.
Yeah, cool. Next week's discussion question: talk about one way that the concept of memory is used in Ward.
Yeah, this is a tough one. Tough one, kind of. I mean, it's just, I think it's very open-ended, so maybe it's not tough, but I just want to, let's just talk about memory.
Yeah, I think it's something that has been throughout this story, and almost to the point where it was staring us in the face, and we did talk about it, but maybe not in the sense of saying let's talk specifically about the concept of memory as a theme. Yeah. So that's what I want to do. Yeah.
And maybe as part of that answer, work through how Tristan and Byron relate to memory, similar to how the rest of Breakthrough.
That'd be cool. Sure. Yeah. Well, that's all we've got for you this week on We've Got Ward. You guys are all part of this show, so feel free to provide us with advice, questions, or thoughts on this week's reading.
You can reach us via email at gotwormpod@gmail.com or at our Twitter account at gotwormpod. My personal Twitter account, where you see me complain about the Oscars, is at ScottDaily85, and Matt's is at More Dinamail. What do you complain about on Twitter, Matt?
I just retweet funny things that I see mainly.
Man, that's so wholesome. You're really doing this thing right.
I mean, yeah, I guess so.
That came out sarcastic, but I meant
it. I just mute everything that displeases me. So all I see is funny things now.
Am I muted?
No.
Oh my God, I'm muted.
If you're not already subscribed to We've Got Ward, we strongly recommend you do so and never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else in the world you can listen to podcasts.
And as always, you can find this and all the other shows we do over at doofmedia.com. Reminder, that's where you can find our newest show, Kingslingers. It's doofmedia.com/Kingslingers, where you'll find the links to subscribe to that. Comes out tomorrow. I'm so excited. Listen to it.
Yeah, I'm excited too. And if you like any of our shows and you want to support them, consider donating to our Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia. You can donate $1 a month or whatever else you can afford. Supporting us on Patreon gives you tons of great bonuses like voting in our quarterly fan art and costume contests, hangout sessions, access to live streams of our recording sessions, and our excellent Discord chat. As always, make sure you head over to patreon.com/wildbow and donate to Wildbow because this is his world. We're just playing in it. This week, special thanks to new patrons, Bidoofs, Felix M, Sophie S, and TVC Grid. We really appreciate y'all.
Yeah, thank you everyone so much.
Yeah,
it really it means the world to us. We got so much. I know I always say this, but like this whole thing is fully funded by you guys. So everything we do, your guys' funding makes it happen. The new show I'm about to launch with Matt was a goal on our Patreon. We're only doing the show because enough of you supported us. So it absolutely means the world.
Yeah, you guys made it happen.
Mm-hmm. And if you cannot afford to donate right now, of course, that's fine. You can help us out by just listening to us talk right now, downloading the episode, sharing the episode, retweeting anything we tweet, all of it. Just retweet it all. Or, of course, you can leave us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts, on Stitcher, on Spotify, wherever you're listening to the show. Hit the 5-star button, write a review, and hit submit. That helps us too. It really does.
And if you want to do us like a double favor, then also do that for Kingslingers because this is the first week or so that it's out, and that really matters.
It's like so freaking important on Apple's whole algorithm thing. So just just do that. If you do it before you even listen to it. Wait, no, that's dishonest. Don't do that. Listen to it.
I mean, if you have been putting off doing some iTunes reviews, if you've had that on your calendar and just never gotten around to it, doing it like right now would be so nice. So nice.
Yeah. Related, if you're do iTunes reviews on your calendar, that's a little weird.
I mean, maybe they're just really organized, Scott.
Sure.
Anyway, that's all we have for you this week. We'll be back next week to find out what happens when people stop being polite and start cracking worlds. That's a
Real World reference. The MTV show Real World.
Thanks.
I didn't know if anyone was going to get it.
I didn't. Thanks for explaining it.
That's how I do jokes. I explain them after.
I mean, I had to read it, so I'm glad someone explained it.